All right, so you know you're here because you want to know what's really going on, right? You like cutting through the noise and speculation and getting to the heart of things.
Absolutely.
That's what we do here, right? And there's no shortage of noise and speculation when it comes to this whole thing with the Epstein files, is there?
Not at all. And I think that's why a lot of people are so frustrated about it.
Yeah, today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the questions that are swirling around, the release of the Epstein files or the lack thereof.
The frustration, the question is the whole nine yards.
Yeah, and we're going to be basing our discussion today on a recent Valuetainment video. And just to give you the full title, it's called Intelligence War Over Epstein. Anna Paulina, Luna Rill, Kash Patel over Epstein files release.
Quite a title.
It is quite a title, and it features a pretty intense exchange, I'd say, between Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna and Kash Patel.
Very intense.
So our mission today is to try to understand, what are the main concerns that people have about these files not being fully released yet? What explanations are being offered for the delays? And then what are the broader implications of all of this?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, so why don't we start with Congresswoman Luna? She mentions early on that she was actually directly involved with the task force on declassification.
Right.
And she makes it sound like there was, a pretty solid understanding at the time that the Attorney General's office would be releasing these Epstein files.
Yes. Initially, there was a great deal of enthusiasm and expectation surrounding the release of these files.
Right. And she was working closely with Kash Patel on this.
Right.
And then, fast forward a bit, and it seems like that initial enthusiasm quickly turned into frustration, right?
Yeah, very much so.
In the video, Luna's pretty direct in her criticism of both Attorney General Bondi and Kash Patel over what she sees as, a botched release of the files.
Mm.
And you see the same kind of sentiment, bubbling up all over social media, people asking, where are the files? It gets kind of lumped in with those other, historical documents that people are waiting to see released, like the JFK files and the MLK files.
Yeah, it taps into this bigger desire for transparency in government.
Right, exactly. And I think that's why you see so much passion around this issue.
Absolutely.
So, we have that initial wave of expectation and excitement, and then it seems like things just kind of, stalled out.
It's fascinating to see that contrast between those early assurances and the reality of what we've seen.
Right, and that's where things get really interesting, right? Because in the excerpts from this video, Kash Patel, he repeatedly talks about a day one release of the Black Book.
The Black Book, yes.
This list of individuals, right, who are associated with Jeffrey Epstein and all these sex trafficking allegations.
Right, his language is pretty emphatic on that point.
Oh, yeah, it is. Roll out the Black Book, like, on day one. And it's when you hear that you really start to feel the disappointment and almost like a sense of betrayal coming through in the discussion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's that one point where they say, we were lied to and now we look like idiots.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong statement, and it really highlights how high those initial expectations were.
Totally. And, it does make you wonder, where is Kash Patel now? Why aren't we hearing more from those who made these very public promises?
Exactly.
So this feeling of, unfulfilled promises, I think it opens the door to kind of a more complex and honestly kind of a dramatic narrative.
Yes, it does.
Congresswoman Luna talks about an absolute war taking place in the intelligence agencies.
An intelligence war. Wow.
Yeah, she really suggests that there's this huge internal conflict going on.
Right, and she brings up some really interesting points to support that claim.
Right, like she mentions those reported concerns within the CIA about sensitive information, maybe leaking to foreign countries. And then you have this alleged whistleblower who claimed that there was actually evidence destruction happening at the FBI.
Evidence destruction.
Yeah, right after Trump's election.
That's a serious accusation.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. And I think it really paints this picture of deep divisions and mistrust within these really powerful institutions, right?
And if you think about it in a historical context, are there specific instances or patterns of behavior that might lend credence to this idea of an internal conflict within these agencies?
It's a good question, and it makes you think, how much do we really know about what goes on behind closed doors in these places?
Right.
But going back to the Epstein files, the belief that's being voiced here is that the delay in releasing the list isn't just due to, bureaucratic slowness.
Right.
It's that the people who are involved, they're still there.
They're still in power?
Yeah, and they're actively working to keep these names private.
It adds a whole other layer of suspicion to the situation.
For sure. And, the video also touches on Trump's involvement in all of this, or maybe lack of involvement would be a better way to put it.
Interesting.
The perspective being offered here isn't necessarily that Trump himself is, intentionally blocking the release.
Okay.
It's more that there are all these powerful figures embedded in government who are really the ones exerting the influence.
Right. And it's worth remembering that declassification isn't just a matter of, snapping your fingers and it's done.
Right.
There are legal and security protocols, interagency reviews, potential risks to ongoing operations.
Yeah, it's a complicated process. It can be very complicated.
So the video then shifts gears a bit and starts talking about how this whole issue resonates with the public.
Okay.
They reference some poll data from a sample of, I think it was around 2,300 voters.
2,300, okay.
And it's interesting because only about 10% of those polled identified the Epstein files as like a top concern for them.
Oh, wow. So it's not as high on the public's priority list as some might think. Right. It seems like issues like border security, wokeness, the economy, those were all much higher priorities for the people polled.
That's really interesting to consider.
Isn't it? And get this, the Epstein files actually got a score of 0 when they were assessing, progress on key priorities at the time.
0? Wow.
Yeah, so it really makes you think, what factors might be contributing to this? Is it just a lack of understanding of how significant this issue could be?
Possibly.
Or maybe people just feel powerless to actually change anything. Or maybe they're just more focused on, their day-to-day concerns.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of all those things.
Probably right. And this leads to this really fascinating hypothetical scenario that they bring up in the video.
Right.
Imagine a president, right, who's being advised against a full release of the Epstein files.
Okay.
Because of national security concerns, right? Because releasing those names could compromise leverage over certain individuals, even allies.
Oh, wow. So the argument is that keeping this information secret is actually in the best interest of the country.
Exactly. And they even do this little role-playing thing in the video where, like, this anonymous advisor is basically arguing that releasing the complete list would be incredibly disruptive and would jeopardize crucial intelligence assets.
Right. That kind of scenario really highlights the tension between transparency and national security.
Oh, for sure. And it also feeds directly into this whole idea of a shadow government, right? This feeling that there's this, unelected, unaccountable power structure operating behind the scenes, and that these delays are just proof of that.
It plays into a lot of people's fears and anxiety.
Absolutely. And they even bring up Tucker Carlson. In the video, he reportedly said that Congress is scared to death of the intelligence communities because of the potential for retaliation.
Interesting.
And they mentioned Chuck Schumer's 6 Ways to Sunday comment.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
It really underscores this perceived imbalance of power, right?
It does.
And how dangerous it could be to challenge these agencies. So in the middle of all of this, you have Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, and her profile seems to be getting bigger and bigger, right?
It does seem that way.
The video points out that she's getting a lot more recognition these days, and she's playing a very active role on the House Oversight Committee Task Force for Declassification.
So she's really becoming a key figure in this fight for government transparency.
Yeah, she is, and I think that's one of the most interesting takeaways from all of this.
So to wrap things up, we have several major points of tension here.
Right.
Clear and public promises were made about the release of the Epstein files, but those promises haven't been fulfilled.
Leading to a lot of frustration.
Right, a sense of betrayal even,
Yeah.
and the narrative of a potential intelligence war, the fear of powerful entrenched interests within the government. Those are some of the explanations that are being put forward to explain these delays.
Right. And it's important to remember that while there's a very vocal group of people who are laser focused on getting these files released.
Right.
The poll data suggests that it might not be the top priority for everyone.
It's a complex issue.
It is. So here's a final thought for you to chew on.
Okay.
Given all of this, right, the conflicting priorities within the government, the alleged pressures from these powerful unseen forces, what does this whole situation with the Epstein files tell us about how difficult it really is to achieve true transparency and accountability when you have all of these, powerful interests at play?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And what might the long-term consequences be for, public trust in our institutions when these delays and this lack of transparency continue? When a segment of the population is left feeling like they're being kept in the dark intentionally?
It's definitely something to think about.
It is food for thought, for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, well, that's going to do it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, take care.
You too.